There is a type of person that makes other people deeply, viscerally uncomfortable, and those people don't even know why. You could be standing completely still, saying nothing, and someone across the room will feel the urge to either confess something or leave. You aren't doing anything, you're just existing. And somehow that's enough to change the entire temperature of a space. Psychologists have studied this phenomenon for decades. Anthropologists have found traces of it in ancient civilizations across every continent. And in one of the oldest indigenous traditions in North America, they gave this type of person a specific name, one that carries more weight than most people realize. Today we're going to talk about that. Not in the vague, feel-good way you might have heard before. We're going to go deep. Behavioral science, real psychology, historical record, and some things about your own mind that you've probably felt your entire life but never had the language to describe. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you're going to understand something about yourself that changes the way you see every single interaction you've ever had. There is a concept in behavioral psychology called involuntary influence. It refers to the documented phenomenon where certain individuals alter the emotional state of others without intention, without action, and sometimes without even speaking. These aren't charismatic leaders. They aren't trained therapists. They are ordinary people with an extraordinary neurological signature that forces everyone around them into a kind of emotional honesty they didn't consent to. In neuroscience, this is partly explained through mirror neuron density. The average brain has a baseline level of mirror neurons. Those are the cells responsible for reading other people's emotions, predicting behavior, and generating empathy. But in certain individuals, that system is operating at a level that's almost off the charts. Their nervous system doesn't just read a room, it becomes the room. What most people don't realize is that this isn't always a comfortable gift. In fact, for most people who carry it, the first 40 years of their life feel less like a superpower and more like a curse they can't explain and can't escape. If you've ever felt like you were born into the wrong frequency, like everyone else got a handbook for how to exist in the world and yours went missing, what I'm about to share with you might be the first thing that actually makes sense of your entire life. In the Lakota tradition, there is a sacred archetype called the Heyoka. Not a myth, not a metaphor, a real recognized role within the community. Someone who was identified, often in childhood, as functioning in a way that was backward from everyone else. Not broken, not defiant, just wired differently at a level so fundamental that even their perception of reality ran in the opposite direction from the people around them. The Lakota elders didn't try to fix the Heyoka. They didn't medicate them or marginalize them. They elevated them, because they recognized something that modern psychology is only now beginning to quantify. These individuals didn't just experience the world more intensely, they changed the world simply by moving through it. But here's what most videos on this topic get completely wrong. They make it sound beautiful. They package it in glowing language and tell you that you're rare and powerful and chosen. And while some of that is true, it leaves out the most important part, the mechanism, the actual psychological and neurological reason why this happens. And more importantly, what it costs you. And what you can do about it. So let's start at the very beginning, with something that happened to you so early in your life that you might not even remember it consciously. Before you were old enough to have language for it, you noticed something that other children around you didn't seem to notice. You felt what people were actually feeling, not what they were saying, not what their face was showing, the real thing underneath. The mother who smiled at you while her hands were shaking. The teacher who laughed too loud and too long. The parent who said everything was fine in a voice that vibrated with something that was not fine at all. You couldn't explain it. You just felt it. Like there were two conversations happening in every room, the one out loud and the real one happening underneath the surface, and for some reason, you could hear both simultaneously. This is called emotional dissonance detection. It's a measurable cognitive function, and in most people, it operates at a low hum in the background. They pick up on inconsistencies when they're severe or when they're looking for them. But in a small subset of people, this function runs constantly, automatically, and with a sensitivity level that makes it nearly impossible to be in a dishonest environment without your entire nervous system reacting to the lie. You weren't imagining it. You weren't being dramatic. Your brain was picking up on micro-expressions, vocal tonality shifts, body language misalignments, and electromagnetic field variations that most people's brains filter out as irrelevant background noise. Your filter was set differently from the beginning, and here's where it gets genuinely fascinating. Because this heightened detection system doesn't just let you see what people are feeling, it broadcasts something back to them. This is what researchers studying interpersonal emotional regulation call reflective resonance, and it is the core of what makes a person like you so fundamentally disorienting to everyone around you. When you are present with someone, your nervous system begins mirroring their emotional state with extraordinary precision. But then, and this is the critical part, it amplifies it. It sends it back. So the person who walked into the room hiding their anxiety suddenly feels twice as anxious. The person carrying guilt they've been suppressing for months suddenly feels it pressing up against their chest like a physical weight. They don't know why. They can't point to anything you said or did. They just feel exposed in a way that has nothing to do with logic and everything to do with what your energy is doing to theirs. Some people will love you for this without being able to name why. They'll say you're easy to talk to. They'll say you make them feel safe. What they mean is that in your presence, they stop performing. They don't have the capacity to perform anymore because you've removed the energetic space in which the performance could exist. Others will avoid you. They'll say you make them uncomfortable. They'll call you intense or exhausting or too much. What they mean is that they came to you performing and you made the performance impossible, and they're not ready to live without it. Neither of these reactions has anything to do with you doing anything wrong. It is a simple function of what you are. But let's talk about something darker that nobody discusses in the feel-good empath videos. Because this gift doesn't come without a price that is serious and specific, and you deserve to understand it clearly. When your nervous system is running this level of emotional input processing constantly, absorbing, amplifying, reflecting, it generates an enormous physiological cost. Studies on individuals with heightened empathic sensitivity show consistently elevated cortisol levels, disrupted sleep architecture, higher baseline activation of the amygdala, and a pattern of emotional fatigue that doesn't respond to the interventions that work for everyone else. You can't just take a walk and clear your head. You can't just watch a funny movie and feel better. The processing is happening at a level below your conscious control, which means it doesn't stop when you want it to stop. It stops when it's done. And for someone like you, it is rarely done. This is why you've probably spent large portions of your life feeling exhausted in ways that don't match your activity level. You wake up tired. You end conversations feeling drained. You walk out of social situations that should have been low stakes and feel like you just ran a marathon. This isn't weakness. This is the hidden cost of operating a nervous system that is doing 3 times the work of the average person, and doing most of it invisibly. And here's something that nobody tells you about this exhaustion. It has a secondary effect that is even more insidious. Because you are constantly absorbing and processing other people's emotional states, your own emotional signals begin to get buried under the noise. You become so fluent in other people's inner worlds that you lose the ability to hear your own. You'll know exactly what a near stranger is feeling after a 5-minute conversation, but you'll have no idea what you actually want for dinner. You'll be able to articulate the root trauma behind your friend's relationship pattern with startling clarity, but you won't be able to name your own needs in an intimate relationship without enormous effort. This is not a metaphor. This is a documented feature of hyperempathic nervous system architecture. The same sensitivity that makes you extraordinary with other people makes you a stranger to yourself. And the Lakota knew this. That's part of why the Heyoka existed in a community context, not isolated, not celebrated privately, held in community. Because the Heyoka needed to be seen and grounded by others in order to stay functional. Their gift required a container. Without it, the gift becomes a wound. Let me tell you about something that happens in your mind while you're asleep. Because most people with this profile have no idea this is occurring, and it explains a great deal about why you are the way you are in the morning. When you go to sleep, your brain doesn't downshift the same way a typical brain does. While most people enter a slow descent into deeper and deeper rest, your brain during REM sleep is extraordinarily active, specifically in regions associated with social processing, emotional memory consolidation, and problem solving. You are not resting in the way that word is commonly understood. You are processing. Every unresolved emotional tension you encountered during the day, every conversation that had a hidden layer, every moment where someone's words didn't match what you felt underneath them. Your sleeping brain takes all of that raw data and works it, organizes it, cross-references it against everything you've ever known, and in the early morning hours, most commonly between 3 and 5 a.m., it surfaces the conclusions. This is why you wake up with answers to problems you didn't consciously solve. This is why you bolt upright with a sudden urge to reach out to someone. This is why the feeling of overwhelming confusion you went to bed with is sometimes replaced by an almost eerie clarity in the morning. Not because the problem changed, but because your brain worked through it while your body lay still. This is not spiritual. This is neuroscience. And it also explains why you are chronically sleep-deprived in a way that extra hours in bed don't seem to fix. You're not getting rest during sleep. You're getting work done. Now let's talk about the social experience of being this way. Because this is where it gets really uncomfortable, and it's important that you understand why it's not your fault. When you are in a group of people, something happens that you have no control over. You become a kind of gravitational center for emotional honesty. This doesn't mean you're the loudest person in the room or the most charismatic or the one telling the best stories. It means that the emotional atmosphere of the room begins to organize itself around your presence. Conversations that were shallow become unexpectedly deep. Someone who is holding it together suddenly starts crying without fully knowing why. The group dynamic shifts. The pretending slows down. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the person who is running the biggest performance in the room becomes visibly uncomfortable and either opens up or leaves. You have probably watched this happen dozens of times without understanding the mechanism behind it. You probably thought you did something wrong, said something wrong, made things awkward. You didn't. You simply exist in a way that creates atmospheric pressure on dishonesty, and dishonesty doesn't survive that pressure comfortably. But here is something critical to understand about this, about yourself, about the way this gift operates in close relationships, because this is where the real complexity lives. In your most intimate relationships, romantic partners, closest friends, family members, the mirror effect isn't occasional. It's constant. It means the people closest to you are living in an environment of continuous emotional reflection. They can't hide from themselves when they're around you, not for long. That's an incredibly difficult thing to live inside, even if it's ultimately good for growth. The people who stay close to you for years are people who are committed to their own honesty, their own evolution, their own willingness to see themselves clearly. They're not necessarily the easiest people, but they're real. And the relationships you build with them tend to have a depth that most people never experience. The people who leave, and there will always be people who leave, are leaving the mirror, not you. It is important that you understand this distinction completely, because carrying the belief that you are too much, or too intense, or too difficult is one of the most damaging misassignments you can make about your own nature. You are not too much. You are exactly the right amount. For people who are ready for reality, now I want to talk about something that most people in this space don't want to admit because it complicates the clean, glowing narrative of the gifted empath. Being this way doesn't make you inherently wise. It doesn't make you inherently right. It doesn't make your perceptions automatically accurate. And one of the most dangerous traps for a person with your type of sensitivity is the certainty that your impressions are always truth rather than highly sensitive interpretation. Your nervous system is extraordinary at detecting emotional signal, but signal and meaning are not the same thing. You might feel that someone is angry and be completely right that they're angry, and be completely wrong about why. You might sense that a relationship is coming to an end and be reading a real energy, but misidentify the source. This is not a failure of your gift. It is simply what happens when any powerful instrument is used without calibration. The most sophisticated version of what you are is someone who holds high sensitivity with high humility, who feels deeply and interprets carefully, who trusts the signal but investigates the meaning. The immature version of this, and every single person with this profile has lived through it, is someone who treats their emotional impressions as absolute truth and builds entire realities around perceptions that were vivid but incomplete. This is also why stillness is not optional for you. It is required, not as a spiritual practice, but as a functional necessity. Because without regular, intentional periods of stillness and solitude, you lose the ability to distinguish between what you are feeling and what you are picking up from someone else.
You stop being able to tell where you end and other people begin. And when that line disappears, you become not just unhelpful to others, you become lost to yourself. The ancient practice around the Heyoka always involved periods of withdrawal, of going into solitude to reset the instrument. Not as punishment, not as isolation, as maintenance, like a diagnostic reset that prevents the system from running corrupted data.
If you are not building this into your life deliberately, you are running on corrupted data. And you probably feel it, even if you've never had this exact language for it. Let's talk about the opposite direction, about what happens when this gift is operating cleanly, when the instrument is calibrated, when the person carrying this profile is grounded and self-aware and moving through the world with intention rather than just reaction. What happens is something genuinely rare and quietly extraordinary. You become a presence that people instinctively seek during their most critical moments. Not because you give them the comfort of being agreed with, but because you give them something more valuable, the experience of being truly seen without being judged. The experience of someone who can hold the full weight of their reality without flinching, without lecturing, without projecting a solution onto them before understanding the problem. You become the person who is called at 2 a.m., not the person with the best advice, though your advice is often extraordinary, but the person whose voice on the other end of the line immediately makes the chaos feel manageable. Because your nervous system transmits something, a grounded certainty, a quiet signal that says, I can hold this with you. Whatever this is, I won't break under it. That is not a small thing. In a world that is largely populated by people who are terrified of emotional weight and who respond to other people's pain by immediately trying to make it smaller, or quieter, or more convenient, your capacity to simply remain present with the full truth of someone's suffering is one of the most radical things a human being can offer another human being. And here is the strange, counterintuitive nature of it. You do this best when you are not trying, when you are not performing empathy, or reaching for the right words, or working hard at being supportive. When you are simply present, simply real, simply yourself, that is when the gift is clearest. That is when what you carry becomes medicine instead of noise. The Heyoka did not heal through effort. The Heyoka healed through presence, through the radical refusal to pretend, through the willingness to walk backward through a crowd and make everyone stop, stare, and for one moment, see themselves. That is the core of what you are. A disruption that produces clarity, a mirror that doesn't flatter, a presence that doesn't comfort through agreement but transforms through honesty. Now, and this is the part that I think matters most, let's talk about what you owe yourself. Because in every conversation about people like you, the entire focus is on what you give, what you carry, what you offer to other people. And almost none of it is about what you need, what you owe yourself. What has to exist in your life in order for this gift to remain a gift instead of becoming a slow, invisible destruction? You need to stop explaining yourself to people who have no capacity or desire to understand you. This is one of the most energy-depleting things a person like you does, and you probably do it constantly. Someone finds you intense or confusing or too direct, and you spend enormous amounts of time and emotional labor trying to frame your nature in a way that makes them comfortable. Stop. You cannot make your signal less powerful to make other people's nervous systems more comfortable. You can only choose environments where the signal is welcome. You need clear, firm, non-negotiable limits on how much of your inner world you give to people who have given you no evidence that they can be trusted with it. Your depth is not a public resource. It is a private treasure that you offer selectively, and you have probably been wildly overgenerous with it in ways that have cost you. You need one or two people in your life who can see you clearly, not who idolize you or who need you or who are drawn to your gift as a resource. People who see you, your confusion, your exhaustion, your wrong perceptions, your brilliance, all of it, and stay anyway. If you do not currently have that, building it is not a luxury, it is an urgent priority, and you need to make peace with the fact that you will never fully belong in most social environments. Not because something is wrong with you, but because you are tuned to a frequency that most environments are not broadcasting on. This is not a tragedy, it is information. It tells you where to stop wasting your energy and start directing it toward the spaces, the people, and the work that actually resonates. Because when you find those spaces, and you will, something remarkable happens. That feeling of being a permanent outsider, that lifelong sense of standing at the edge of every room looking in, that ache of being surrounded by people and still feeling profoundly alone, it lifts. Not completely, not forever, but enough. Enough to remind you that the problem was never you. It was the room. You have spent most of your life in rooms that weren't built for what you carry. And the bravest, most important thing you can do, starting right now, is stop trying to make yourself small enough to fit and start looking for the rooms that were built for someone exactly like you. They exist. The people who will sit across from you and feel seen by you without feeling threatened by you. The work that will draw on everything you are and give you something real in return. The quiet that will actually restore you rather than just pause the noise. These things are not a fantasy. They are what your life looks like when you stop spending all your energy on people and places that require you to be less than what you are. You are not too sensitive. You are not too intense. You are not too much. You are someone with a nervous system that was built for a specific and irreplaceable function. To move through the world in a way that makes honesty possible, that makes depth accessible, that makes the people around you confront what they are rather than perform what they want to be. That is not a burden that happened to you. It is a design. And the question that's worth sitting with, not answering right now, just sitting with, is this. What would your life look like if you stopped apologizing for your design and started living inside it fully?